U.S. President Joe Biden is now speaking in Poland on the 1 anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Let's take a listen.
Our ironclad commitment to NATO's collective security, including guaranteeing that the command headquarters for our forces in Europe are going to be in Poland, period. We're also launching a new strategic partnership with plans to build nuclear power plants and bolster Poland's energy security for generations to come. And Mr. President, the connection between Polish and American people is extremely strong and deep. I was kidding with the President. I was, as a young man, I was born in a coal town of Scranton, Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, in an Irish Catholic neighborhood. Then when Cole died, we moved down to Delaware, to a town called Claymont, Delaware, which was a working class town. But everybody in town was either Polish or Italian. I grew up feeling self-conscious. My name didn't end in an S-K-I or an O. But all kidding aside, the connection between, I was telling the President, the pride, the overwhelming, demonstrable pride that the Polish Americans feel about Poland and the role you're playing now. We were talking about it. It's extreme.
Yeah.
It is. You would be, if you haven't seen it, you should come and see it. And so there's a lot of challenges that we have to face, but I'm confident we can do it together and develop our partnership even further as we meet the challenges we're about to face. I'm absolutely confident in that. So it's a delight to be back, and I'm anxious to get our discussion going, although the President and I solved all the problems in the other room a moment ago. There's nothing left to solve, but all kidding aside, this is a critical relationship for the United States, and we thank you for all the cooperation and help.
President Biden, do you have a reaction to the speech today? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, for more on President Biden and the few sentences that we just heard from him in Poland, we are joined by VOA correspondent Jessica Stone from Washington, D.C. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. So we just heard from President Biden speak in Poland. He is speaking, and he is in Poland really delivering this speech and meeting with Duda and then visiting Kyiv, really in the backdrop of Putin announcing that Russia will pull back from the START nuclear arms treaty, and amid reports that China may provide Russia with lethal weapons to fight Ukraine. So what can we expect moving forward, really?
Well, we know that President Biden is in Poland to make a major address on the just a couple of days before the second anniversary, or the first anniversary, I should say, of the Russia's war in Ukraine. But we don't expect it to address anything about China, anything about Russia's START withdrawal. We really expect that the president, according to White House officials, will focus on American values, on America's commitment to seeing through the conflict in Ukraine, to supporting Ukraine, and to building up NATO. There is no likely roadmap that will be announced on how to end this war in Ukraine. The president is laser-like focused, according to White House officials, on talking about this dichotomy between autocracies and democracies, and that democracies have to continue to grow in order to ensure a free world. So there are really two major audiences for this speech, Susan. Europe, because Europe is still providing about half the support that the United States is to the effort in Ukraine, and the U.S. would like to see that increase. And of course, the other audience is to the American people, who are starting to reduce their support for increased weapon sales or increased financial assistance to Ukraine, particularly as we get closer to the U.S. presidential election. That will come into play as an issue for U.S. President Joe Biden, as he is expected to announce a run again. And there are certainly several people to his right that are much more critical of spending to Ukraine, which is very high on the list of those countries around the world that do not spend money well and that have a lot of corruption.
Yeah, that's very true. And, the Wall Street Journal had an interesting opinion piece saying that it's time for some realism coming from the United States. And as you mentioned, President Biden will have a few audience. He'll have an audience in Europe. He'll have an audience in the United States, but he'll also have an audience in Europe and Russia as well. Do you think that he'll be able to continue the support and enjoy the support that he's been seeing among the American people moving forward when it comes to Ukraine?
Well, he's certainly going to make the case for that. And of course, there is bipartisan support. It's not as though these Republican voices or these critical voices of further funding to Ukraine are the loudest in the room. But it's also the case that the president needs to continue to make it clear to Americans, particularly in light of what just happened in Ohio with that terrible toxic train crash. There have been a number of criticisms online, in particular, comparing the president's trip to Ukraine in contrast to his lack of a trip to his own citizens in the United States, and not making a visit to that crash, which affected 5,000 people and could affect many more as time goes on from an environmental standpoint. So there's this juxtaposition right now in terms of criticism for him. He needs to make the case, really, why is Ukraine's security and Ukraine's safety and this conflict in Ukraine so important to the average American? And what do American values mean at home? This idea of democracy and spreading democracy, how does that translate into safety and national security for the individual American? These are points that he's going to need to hit on in this speech to really move the needle, because we saw this recent Associated Press NORC poll showing 48% of U.S. adults in favor of weapons in Ukraine. That is down from 60% less than a year ago. So we are seeing a drop that the president really needs to reach out and address those people's concerns, saying, what does this mean to me? The price of eggs, the price of gas, all of the things that people are most likely concerned about in their daily lives. How does Ukraine affect me? That's the answer he's going to have for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to expect President Trump also to go and visit East Palestine later on in the week. And we know that part of Ohio is Trump County. So we're going to keep an eye on that as well. Some say that was a pretty smart move on his part. Jessica Stone, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you very soon.